Hello everybody. Well, we have a beautiful still life of yellow tulips and fresh from the market. Really very pretty. They'll open up quite a bit as the week goes by. And I just wanted to show you the initial sketch. Well, it's a little hard to see the sketches, but maybe that gives a little better idea. But I wanted to show you also, I've put down some frisket in a few places, and I've put down some masking fluid in a few places. So for the masking fluid, I taped down this stencil, and then I filled in some of the rectangles. And I used a rubber nib because I'm finding it easier to use a rubber nib than to use a brush, because it's very hard on brushes and you have to, they don't last very long. When you use them you have to use very cheap brushes, but the rubber nib is good, and then these rubber nibs come in different sizes and shapes. This is a little set called Barvoti. And masking fluid is complicated. So I store it in this container, always upside down, and always with some cling wrap on it and tightly closed, and then upside down. And then when I go to use it again, it is good to use. Otherwise it hardens inside and is not good to use. In terms of the frisket that is in a few places, let's see if we can see them. I'll unzoom. I think that's unzoom. No, unzoom. Yeah. A frisket that's in a few places. Here, a few kind of dramatic places, and a nice straight line here and a nice straight line there. I use the frisket where I want to have some good straight lines and not fuss with the nib. I use the nib in a few places where I want to preserve white. The frisket is a clear plastic that is low tack but has some tack. And on the other side is this paper. So you can cut it with scissors or an X-Acto knife if you want along a drawing to any shape that you want. Then you separate the paper, like those little plastic bags in the supermarket that are so hard to separate. But anyway, you separate the paper from the thin plastic and it sticks to the... So when I want a really sharp line, the frisket is one way to do that versus the using the nib and drawing some lines. You can also use a little brush. If I were to use a brush, I would use a very inexpensive thin brush that has a pretty good bristle, but is not a costly bristle, is synthetic. And so that is the beginning of this drawing, and it has some masking fluid in places where there are light and where I want to preserve the white, and some sharp shapes like these lines here in a few other places. So the next process will be to start the painting. I hope you enjoy this. Okay, I'm going to start with mixing some greens to test whether that frisket is going to work for me. I've only used it once before, so the first thing I want to do is try to mix together. I'm going to try to mix together some greens until I get, that's too yellow. Let's see here. Bring in some blues until I get the tone of, yeah, I like that bluish hue better than, I know that the tulips always have green leaves that are rather yellowish in color, but for my painting I prefer to have a green that is a little more blue in its color and a little darker than normal. On the tulip leaf, I'll just show you one more time how bright green the leaves are. But when painting, it's what's needed for the painting that is most important. Now, what I wanted to see here was whether I was going to get, with this frisket versus masking fluid, the sharp edges that I wanted for this kind of a few abstract shapes in the leaves. I've got those little rectangles on the left-hand side, and over here on the leaves I just wanted to include some shapes that would be strong. I think it's not going to work. You see how it's going underneath? Well, that's a disappointment. Well, let's see if I use less water on another one, if I can get it to not go use less water on this one. Let's see if it will give me that shape that I want. Looks like that might do it. So that is the story with that. It's not ideal. I would have preferred that it really kept the color out, but at least every painting I enjoy doing something different with it. So I'll just continue in a few of these leaves to do something a little different. By having that shape in there. And on the leaf where it didn't work, I'm just going to lift up that piece of frisket. Well, I have to use a little tiny X-Acto knife in order to lift that up. See how it didn't work? So, since it didn't work, we'll just go in and fix it right away as a normal leaf without any shape in it. And leave the other two. So now I know that in order for the frisket to work, I have to have a fairly concentrated mixture of paint and not too much water in it, because the watery wash went right under that under that piece of frisket. Here's the piece of frisket here. Once it's lifted, looks like a thin piece of plastic film. All right, so I've got one more piece of frisket, and I'll take some more blue and make this mixture a little more blue. And I'll paint around that piece, and hopefully that piece will, hopefully I have the right amount of water. Not too much, hopefully. I'm just going around that little triangle. I see it seems to be bleeding in. Not as much as the first one did, but still more than I'd like. I don't want any bleeding in, but it did. So I'll just finish up this leaf. It's got a little tulip behind. And the rest of the leaves, I only put the frisket in a few leaves. I don't think I have any more there. No. So, the other thing I wanted to test is the masking fluid. Oh, I have a piece of frisket here. I was going to put some blue vase color. The glass has a bluish cast. Again, I should be careful not to make it too. I wanted to make it really thin and watery, but I'll just make this section without too much water, and hopefully the frisket hopefully will keep the blue from going in the area where I've put the frisket. And then I'll take this blue and just carry it in a loose way into some of the other areas of glass. In some of the other areas of glass you may see, I think, that there is some masking fluid that is showing areas of the cut glass that are reflecting some light. Now I'll also be showing some leaves through the glass a little later. But for now I just want to test the masking fluid and the frisket. So there's a little bit of masking fluid on both sides. And with the masking fluid I don't have to worry at all about it getting underneath the frisket like it did. Masking fluid makes a very solid seal with the paper. It's like it behaves like a rubber cement, and when the painting in the area where you've put it is dry, then you just rub it off with your finger or an eraser. So that's how I'm going to address the cut glass. There's a rim that I'm protecting from me having any paint color on that. It'll be shown as white. Now over here in this area, I was hoping to have a very intense blue. So I'm going to mix together what would be a combination of Payne's Gray with Blue Hue together with ultramarine, making it extremely dark. And I have two things going on here. One is this frisket line. I have a couple of frisket lines, so I want to just see if they are going to work if I don't put too much water in that. No, I think it's not going to work. But we'll see. I wanted to see if I could get some really strong vertical lines with that. But anyway, over here where I have the masking fluid that I stenciled on, doesn't matter about the water content of the paint. So I can just drop in any amount of water that I want over here. So I'll transition to some more watery washes. Since it's dark on the behind the glass in that area, I'll carry a little bit of that color into the vase. Just lightly let that come in to the vase on that side of the vase. Okay, and so I'm going to continue with the blue mixed with the Payne's Gray blue hue in here to get, I want a very dark color around the masking fluid because I want the masking fluid to, when it's rubbed off, to show little white rectangles. So I'm painting fairly wet and very close to the masking fluid and over the masking fluid, not worrying about getting paint on the masking fluid and not worried about it getting through the masking fluid onto the paper. And sometimes I've got a little more black, Payne's Gray rather, and sometimes less. So over here under these leaves, make it a little darker and also put some more into the wash there. So at different times I'll do the background last, but this time because I wanted to play with the masking fluid and the frisket, I'm doing it first because then if it doesn't work, I can either repair it or give up on this painting and not waste my time on it. But I think it's actually going to work pretty well. Some areas might not. It looks like the paint was too wet under the frisket there, so it's not perfect. Like I said, I'm changing the colors just a little here and there. Now I'm going into a little bit more manganese blue, getting away from the dark and letting it get a little lighter here. I think I'll not go all the way up, but rather just let this wash end here at the, and have a little bit of light behind the stem there, but not very much. Okay, I think that's, here, let me just blend this in here and have some color. This is a moment where I might use my scrubber and put that color up there that I let get into the leaf. I'm not quite ready to have that happen, although I might want it to happen a little bit later, but not quite yet. Okay. So now that that little experiment has been done. The only thing I can really do is wait for it to dry completely and then remove the masking fluid and see how it worked out. Okay, so I have a little bit of masking fluid also up in the tulips to preserve some white highlights. And by the way, this little bit of scrubbing that I was doing was with a scrub brush. Various companies make these little scrub brushes. I keep all my things pretty separated in bell jars. These are all scrub brushes of different sizes and angles. That way they're ready to grab when I need them. Just like I kept the nibs in a little plastic bucket with the masking fluid right there with it. The more organized you are about your supplies, the more possible it is to work quickly and not have to stop and go looking for things. I'm going to spread out a little bit of this color here. Okay, so we'll come back shortly after this is completely dry and see how that worked. See if it worked. It's fun to experiment and try different things. So I've used masking fluid often before. I'm not a big fan of it, but nevertheless, this was a time when in the vase, preserving some white areas might be really interesting. We don't necessarily need to preserve white areas in the tulips and leaves, but I like the idea if I can get these shapes to be rectangular over there, it'll create a nice pattern in the background. In another painting I did of tulips last year, I did use the stencil, the same stencil that I showed you, but I used, everything is watercolor in this painting, except the little rectangular shapes. But I liked the background then, and I thought, well, let's see if I can successfully do that without having to use a little bit of acrylic paint or gouache paint, but see if I can do it, or ink is possible too, white ink is possible. But I'd like to have it be a fully watercolor painting and not have any other media in it if it's possible. So, but in the end, you just make the decision for the purpose of the painting, even if you have to give up on its purity as purely watercolor. But let's see if we can make this work by these two techniques. See you when this is dry. Okay, I think it's dry, and I'm just checking that there's no wet paint, and it's clean. Wet paint on top of the frisket and masking tape. So let's start with that one. Oh, nice clean lines. So that's the secret with this frisket. And there's a couple of bleeding areas, but I can remove those with my knife. So not too bad. Not perfect, but not too bad. So that's all I did with the frisket. And then we had a little line here, and we knew that there was some bleeding on that line. And again, another line. There was some bleeding on that one, but now the process is a little clearer. Basically, you have to go in with a pretty dry brush. I think I might be able to, with my X-Acto knife, I might be able to remove some of these. Or else I can just draw a nice clean line next to them. Let me try that. Let me see if I can do that. With a very thin, fine brush, I think I can take that very, very dark blue and or dark green, and just add a little line next to that line to even it out so I don't have those. Let's try that. Nope, not yet. Try it again, a little more paint on the brush. Yeah, I can sort of even that line out so it's... I have two choices. I can either scrape it up, which could reconstitute some of the paint on the side and perhaps have it bleed in, or I can do this, even it out a little bit. Still left a pretty nice line. So this was a fun experiment. I'll do the same over here and just even it out. So in the area where it bled. But it did, aside from the margins, it did a nice job of preserving the white on the internal part of the frisket. So it's just a matter of practice and getting it right. But I like the frisket instead of using a lot of masking fluid. But they both have good possibilities. Okay, now here won't be able to really even that out on that fine line, but maybe a little bit, just a little bit. Here it just bled in completely into that part of the line. But I can put in a little more definition and leave some of that coverage of the line. And it certainly worked better than trying to draw a straight line. But one possibility of drawing a straight line is to use a special ruler that is made for using with ink, but can be used with drafting fluid. I mean, masking fluid. Well, this isn't perfect, but it's still nice to kind of have, I think it's nice to have a few lines there as a design element. Okay. Now, in terms, I'm just going to remove a little bit of the masking fluid. One way is just with your finger, if it's thick enough, to do it that way. Another possibility is to use some drafting tape or another way is to use a special eraser but usually I find that for the most part, if I put the masking fluid on thick enough, like this, and my fingers are not greasy, they're clean, they're squeaky clean, and there's no soap film or cream on them or anything, then I can just, as long as the masking fluid is completely dry, I can just go in with my fingers and do this, and look how it comes up. Okay, so I'm going to take it out where I have that rim, that nice rim, and since I put some paint in this area, I'm not going to go in where I have the squares. Because I might smudge that paint. I don't want to go near that area. But this area, I can show you. This didn't come up too well here, but where it doesn't come up very well, I can take a little bit of tape, of the artist tape, and sometimes that will, see, just folded it, and that will lift it. You see whatever residue is there. See how it gets on the tape? So I can use that also. Prefer to try to use my fingers for the bulk of it, because I don't want to scratch the paper with this tape, and my fingers don't scratch it. So I'm not going to do the rest. I do want to try the over here to see if some of the stenciling worked. It didn't work great. So it probably would be better not to use the stencil, but to just draw the rectangles and paint around them. Or you could put the masking fluid after you draw them, but trying to do the masking through the stencil was probably not the best process, because the stencil is not totally thin, so the masking fluid didn't go in very. I think I showed you the stencil. So it's not a completely thin plastic. It's got some heft to it. And so it was hard to get the masking fluid to be completely perfect in there. But if I wanted to do something quite perfect, then I think probably drawing in the squares and filling them in very carefully. But one of the possibilities now is to define some of these squares by using the colors that were in the background. I mean, it's one has to do it carefully so that it's not looking it's not taking away the beauty of the soft wash in the background. But I think there's some of that can be done like that. So I think that's the process that I'll follow in cleaning that up and leaving some squares and defining them a little better here and there. You see, just like that. So and these were not squares, actually. They were rectangles of slightly different shapes, not perfect shapes, and that's one of the things that I liked about them, is they were a bunch of kind of unusually shaped rectangles. But it's kind of fun to have a little pattern in there. And it doesn't have to be exactly what was on the stencil. I can change it a little bit. So on this side, yeah, something like that. So I just wanted you to see I've begun the process. Here some of the stems will show through. I'll clean up this image here to make it look a little more like cut glass a little later with you. But what I will do off camera is clean up this background, and when this is dry, remove the rest of this masking fluid and clean up those edges. And then we'll come up with the next step of trying to get this to look a little more like cut glass. Okay, and I'll do that on camera. But I'll clean up this background here in this way. Clean up the background here off camera. And meanwhile, leave these nice edges in here. I'll just show you how I'll clean up this one. This one. Just like I did the ones up in the leaves, so that I have this one being nice and sharp. It's a bit of an abstract complement to the ones above, just to create a little bit of diversity and interest from here and there in the painting, so that it's not meant to be all realistic. With that little bit of diversity of shape, and this echoes some of that shape there and brings them together in a kind of marriage. It's a little bit of a design feature. So I'll just see this edge here. Just bring that down a little bit for the vase to continue. And then the rest of the vase work, after I clean up that background over there, come back and do that. Already that vase is starting to look a little better. Okay. This vase has a small, very fine edge that I want to show right here. And that's all I'm going to do at this point. I'm going to show that because I want this little bit of edge to be different from that triangle that's there. There. Okay. So that's enough for on camera right now. We'll come back, work on the cut glass, and start working on the tulips. Back at you soon. Hi. So I'm pretty happy with the way that came out, painting around those little boxes and making some boxes with little lines in them and decoration, creating a few other lines and putting some little tiny boxes down in this area with translucent manganese blue. So that came out pretty well, I think. I'm happy with that. And that's all that really matters, is that whoever you are as the artist, you're happy with it. Because that's the priority, is to be painting and to be happy. So I'm going to leave the vase for a little while because I think the detail of the vase will depend to some extent on the detail of the painting. So my next process is to paint some leaves. Now, as I mentioned, the color of the leaves is really very bright yellowish green, like a soft pea green, or it's even less vibrant and lighter than an apple green. But I have a little mark there that has to come out with one of my little scrubbers. So one of my little scrubbers has some paint on it, so that's not good. You get another little scrubber. There's a few little dots because I did put some splatter over there, and okay, so that's good. Clean up that scrubber. I'm going to continue with this bluish green because I just prefer it. And so I'll keep up with that. But I think I might have a few leaning toward the actual color. Let's do a few of the leaves in a more tulip color. And I mentioned to you that I do have some masking fluid on some of these leaves. So I'll just paint over that. And then when I remove the little bit of masking fluid. So there's a leaf that's a little more tulip color, but I'm going to drop some of the bluish green in there so that it kind of harmonizes with the others. So I'll put a little bit of the dark blue that I had over here in there too. Because also as the leaves move around, there's parts of them that are in shadow and parts that are not. And on tulips, for some plants, I like to just leave the leaves very soft and not too defined. But tulips have such incredibly sculpturally interesting leaves that for them, I like to show them a bit. So I'm just using various blues and greens and mixing them together. And you're seeing some places where there's masking fluid, so I'll just leave that for now. I may have to come and touch up in those areas if they're too defined and they look a little strange. But for now, I just put in different colors of greens in these leaves, so there's diversity in the leaves. and they're providing some bit of a interesting backdrop for the and for the stems and the petals. So some will be more green, some will be more bluish. And I'm not really overly thinking this, I'm just moving around and putting different colors in different places, mixing my blues and greens on the paper, not doing a lot of mixing on the palette, but just bringing the various colors. I'll make this leaf a little bit bigger so it goes behind the tulip and helps to define the shape of the tulip there. I did some drawing of the leaves, but I don't have to be tied to those drawings. Okay, so this is some manganese blue here, which is a wonderful blue, and it brings in the same blue as over there. But I'll drop a little bit of green into it so that the eye can begin to see the relationship, but not be, let's see here. Carry some of that down here. And again, I'm going to bring some green into that blue, but not completely. And here's a nice big tulip kind of leaf that's bent over and forms a very nice curly shape. That's very typical of a tulip, so we want some of those curly leaves that bend over and make that shape. I'll just drop a little dark in there. See, I'm just dropping the color in, letting it blend. And drop a little color in here. Here's a little bit of yellowish green here. I think I'll drop a little bit of that color over here where the leaf is more in the right light on the right hand side, and so it would make sense that on that side the leaves would be a little bit brighter. So you can see that this is kind of a fluid process. As I do each leaf, I decide what might be nice for the leaf next to it, and how much blue to put into some of them. Let me put a little more blue in. And it can be a manganese blue or an ultramarine blue or cobalt blue. I have some Antwerp blue. So I'm not paying attention to which blue. Some of them are the darker ones and some of them are lighter ones. I'd like a little more blue in this down here. So I think you can see how I'm approaching this. I'm not getting overly fussy about exactly which color, paying attention mostly to contrast and change in value. So some are dark. Value is relating to dark versus light. let's see here. Here's a nice little bit of the phthalo blue. I may have to bring in my little armrest so I don't smudge over here. I'm going to put in a little bright phthalo blue there. And bring in a dark ultramarine over that to blend it in so that it's doesn't disappear too much into the background there. Yeah, I'm going to have to turn this, I think. Sorry about that, but I just can't reach and not be in the way of the camera. So here's, and carry that phthalo blue, phthalo green rather. Okay, taking that phthalo green and bringing it up. And then bringing some ultramarine in there. I think that's a nice transitional color for that corner that's going into the manganese blue. Look at how pretty that color is. The phalos. Now I've just done something that probably is a no-no, but it's all right. Sometimes you do that, which is you have a line coming out and leading the viewer's eye perhaps out of the picture a little bit, especially when it's a pointy line and it's pointing out of the picture. I think I might just bend this one here. So that I'm not doing that. Stopping the eye action there by bending it around a little bit. In fact, I might even do something similar here. Changing it a little bit. Widening it a little bit. There. So that just keeps that leaf in the picture a bit. The same over here. I mean, these leaves can go in any direction you want them to go, so they don't have to all be reaching up into the some of them can bend, and that's good. And then you just kind of wonder, oh, what's going on there? And the more that you know the plant, you know that its leaves are just going in all directions, the easier it is to just do this with only looking at the painting. I'm not looking at the still life at all. I really can make these leaves go anywhere I want them to go. I may have to stop because it's all wet and I'm going to make my hand fall into some kind of paint and make a mess, I think. So I may have to just stop for a while, let it dry so that I can come back in and do some more leaves because I think it's yeah, I think you can see it pretty well, but I don't know if you can see that top. Yeah, okay. So we'll just let it go for a little while so it can dry, because otherwise I'm going to stick my hand and make a mess somewhere by smudging, because I can't really reach some of those places over there without being in the way of the camera. So we'll stop for now. Take care. Okay, so I've filled in some greens, continuing exactly in the way that I was, nothing different, just taking some blues, some various greens, hooker green, cascade green, emerald green, olive green, and mixing them with various blues, including manganese blue and ultramarine blue, and some Payne's gray blue hue. So the thing that I want to do next is take some Aurelian, which is a very transparent yellow, and glaze over these tulips. Now I have a little bit of rough masking fluid on these to preserve a little bit of the white. So I'm just going to do this initial glaze and on all of them, because I have some masking fluid on, so I don't have to worry about highlights at this point. But otherwise I would just paint carefully around some areas that would be highlighted. But since the masking fluid is there, then I just can paint right over that masking fluid. It doesn't change anything because it's protecting the so I'm just going to do that first, and then I'm going to come in and drop in a nice rich isoindoline yellow, which is a very warm orangish kind of yellow, and then I'm going to drop in some orange. But for the moment, the first step is a very transparent glaze of the Aurelian yellow, which is one of the most bright and transparent yellows. So now I'm going to drop in that isoindoline yellow in a few places, and I'm just going to let it diffuse into the Aurelian yellow. Nothing very structured. I want it to be loose. I mean, a lot of this painting is very, very linear and could be seen as somewhat controlled. And I want to make sure that it isn't overdone that way. But as it is, you see I have edges that are pretty well defined, even on the tulips. But I'm going to drop in a little bit of that. And then I'm going to take some Nellier orange, just a nice orange. And in some of those flowers, I'm going to drop in some of that. Some more than others, because I don't want to have it be so predictable. Okay. Maybe this one over here, which is more in shadow, maybe I'll drop in a little rose d'or, which is a soft rose, soft reddish rose. Rose d'or means outside, rose outside. Door. And I'll put a little of that rose d'or down in here too. It's a nice pink, dark pink. And I'll leave the others alone. Okay, so I think for now that's good. And the big question is whether to put in a little bit of a quinacridone burnt sienna in a couple. It's a brownish tone, just to that one behind. And I might carry that one into quite a bit of that small one behind. All right, I think for now that'll do it. This is just a quick thing for the, and the other thing that we haven't done is the stems. So I'm just going to take any green, it doesn't matter, any dark green. I've got some masking fluid on the stems, so I don't, on some of the stems. So I'm just going to put in some color like that for now. And then once I remove the masking fluid, we'll touch up all those details. And I think that's all I can do for now without it just, oh, I see I've dropped some color over here, and that is not good. And I don't even know how that happened. But let's see, try to lift it. There will, I don't know where that came from, that color. It must have been just a little speck and somehow got spread. These kinds of things can happen. But you know what? Happy accidents sometimes create, all right, if I'm going to have a happy accident, I'm just going to do the best I can with it. Do a little splatter, and then a little spray. Diffuse some of that. It's important not to be too serious about some of this work, because sometimes it's the little things that happen that force you to make some shift in your plans. I think I need a little Sennelier orange. Yes, that's better. I know you're probably thinking that's totally nuts. And then when I take this board, it will actually make a little bit of, I'm going to take a little bit of that color, that's Sennelier orange, and have some of it as if it's dripping from the flower there. Take a little more spray. And everything else is dry enough that it's not going to drip too. I think that's good. I was wondering what I was going to put in that empty space, and that little accident solved the problem for me. Okay, for now I also am planning to put some manganese blue, this manganese blue over here, this manganese blue, some swirls in that area. But for now, and you see what was nice was that that spray then took some of this color some of that orange got dripped down into the green, which was good. All right. So the thing we do now is just let things completely dry. And the next step is to take off the masking fluid, which I'll do while it's dry, and then we'll start doing some final finishing strokes here and there. Okay, thank you. Hope you enjoyed that. I think you can see the little bit of orange there. Let's see if we can just go into it a little bit. You see, it's very subtle, a little bit here and there, but it's good. Yeah, the watercolor is a dancing partner, and sometimes we just have to let it do a little bit of what it wants to do. I've got a line there that somehow was the accident, and so rather than it be a line, I'd like a little bit of, so I'll just do a little bit here and there. There's a little dot there, little dot there. So where I have some problems that I don't really like here, just gonna put a little color in and pretend it was what was planned all along. Okay. A little more spray. And just let that diffuse. And I always consider the paper towel as almost like another brush. All right, we'll just leave that alone, and when it's all dry, we'll go back, remove the, off camera, I'll remove all the masking fluid, and we'll see how it looks and see where it needs to be touched up to blend in areas around the masking fluid. Because suddenly when all this masking fluid that you can see is here, like here, will all be white. And so we'll have to decide what goes in that white. So the final detailing will be done. The vase has to be finished up, and some finishing touches over in this area have to be done. Then we'll be done. See you then. Okay, we're at the point where the masking fluid has been removed, and it's created some very nice white reflections there. So I think that what I'd like to do is take a little bit of the orange and highlight a few of these petals. Not that they necessarily have to be, but I like the idea of doing that. And I'll put a little bit of the isoindoline yellow in there too, in some places. So leaving some of the white, but not all of it. So using basically those two colors, just, oops, the isoindoline orange, just defining those flowers a little tiny bit, but not too much, hopefully. It's so easy to overdo it, and that is the hardest thing of all, is to fight the tendency to keep doing more. Just a few little bits here and there where there might be some definition. Here's a little bit of that yellow there. Of course, it'll dry to half that color. Leaving a lot of that rough masking fluid. It was put on very roughly with the nib, so it's not a, you know, it's a nice line to work with because it is a rough line. And over here I'm going to put a little red in here. There's a spot that's missing that's looking a little uncomfortable for me down here on the bottom of this flower. So I'm just going to make that flower come down a little bit further with some red and orange. And fill in some of that space there. I hope I'm doing this carefully enough. And some yellow, so that it looks like it's behind. A little more over here, this white spot here. It's basically a tulip that hasn't opened as much. Over here, again, a little more color at the base than at the top. And I think I'll define the tips of that one a little bit more. Bring in some yellow. And over here we had the, you may remember, we had the rose d'or, which is a very natural looking outdoor rose, which is what the word means in French. Just bringing a little bit of that rose as we move into this little more shadow area. Yeah, I think that's probably just about enough. Down here we had a little bit of red. I don't want a white spot there. So just remove that white spot. Blend it in a little more. That's probably enough. And over here we don't want that white spot either. So we're just touching up here and there. On the tulips, being careful not to overdo it. Sometimes what one does is carries the color out beyond boundaries a little bit, and I'm just going to do that a little bit here and here. Maybe here into the blue. Okay, just carrying the color out a little bit. And also down here. I'm going to carry it down into the leaf. And we already started to bring some color down a bit. I'm going to do a little bit more, as if it's coming also from that flower down there. Just take a little bit of that color and bring it down. I think I might bring it down into this white area here. No, that doesn't work. So I just left it out. Okay. Now we're going to go into the greens and touch up some of those greens. Because what I did was leave white areas inside the leaves, and now they should probably be just lighter green areas, not necessarily like this stem, not white, but lighter. You see? And some a little darker than others, but so yeah, I'm thinking that I wasn't sure if I wanted to leave some of those white, but not really liking it, so I'm just bringing it in as lighter colors, maybe a little bit. Some of them are a little bit yellowish green, like this one. Stems, wanted the stems to be lighter, so that's working. See, they're just lighter. And the same, take some blue and do the whites over here with the blue. This is again the manganese blue. Very lightly applied. I didn't have to do the masking fluid, I just felt like it. Could have just painted the petals with variations, but I wanted to just play with it and have used the masking fluid, see how it did. Some of them look a little too strange being so light. So like these over here, they're just a little too odd. I'll just put more color in. So there'll still be a slight variation, but not so much. There's no need to hurry up to do it. I think that's pretty close to being ready for that. And then in terms of the vase, I wanted to put a little bit of gray on the vase, or bluish violet type of gray. The vase has a design. So oftentimes glass has a bit of a grayish or a silvery tone to it, or a violet tone to it. So I just want to bring that in to just distinguish that the vase has some design to it, and that those white marks are part of the cut glass design and not related to the stems. So that's why I'm using a completely different color, using the mixture of the same blue but with a little bit of red added to it to make it violet, and to give it a sense of, just distinguish the lines that are cut in the glass as different from the stems, but still having the ability to see through. Yeah, and I'll put a little bit of a rim, a little bit of, see that just tones down that rim, gives it more of a sense of what that is over there. Now, if I was more of a realist, I would do this very precisely, and all the lines would be very neat. But I like to work this way, so. And I'm getting a lot older, so my hand is not as steady as it used to be. But even when I was younger, I really didn't. I like the idea of it being more rough. So this is just an indication of it being glass and cut glass, because to do it more precisely, it would show all the actual cut lines carefully. But I'm not going to do that. Making this one a little less defined, more rough, deliberately so. Because it's less in front than the other oval, which is right in front of the eye. So this one is more to the side, so it won't be as clear. And some of this shadow is a little more silvery blue and some of it is a little more violet. It's depending on where from the palette I'm taking the color. But I'm doing that deliberately so it's not all exactly the same. And while I'm doing some of that, I'll put a little bit of shading on some of these stems to give them a little bit of sense of roundness, but not too defined. Again, the stems underneath the glass are not as clear. Just indicated. Okay, I think that works well enough. And the last part that I've been wanting to do is very risky. I'm going to do some lines similar to these little swirl lines. I'm going to make them very light, but this is a large empty space, and so I'm just going to lightly and then I want one bit of the manganese blue splatter on this side. I'm going to carry a little bit lightly down here. And I think a watered down version. There. Oh, and look what the water did. Isn't that nice? It made a little curved parallel to the other one. So I think this is done. Just down here, I can't have that, so right down there. I think it is ready. I'll go in a little bit to that area we just did so you can see it hopefully a little better. Let's see, move the camera, sorry. Yeah, I hope we can see it. All right. That is it. It is finished. I hope you enjoyed it. Looking forward to doing some more with you. Take care.